Ready? Let me
Right.
just fix my hairs. Because
I mean,
sometimes I do sit at home alone and scream to
do
myself.
you,
He inspires me as a not as a musician, as a human being. No, well, let's not get me into trouble.
okay, so first up, what made you want to write a story in the first place?
Kat, you've known me for a long time. I've written a lot of stories. I think
Yes.
I think most of my songs actually, especially in the last 3 years, have been stories that have been sort of put to music, but they were stories. I'll probably go back and turn them into longer stories, but I've always written stories since I was a kid, which was about 20 years ago.
I can remember when you wrote Give Yourself Up to Imagination, the song, a couple of years ago now. And you've been giving little snippets of these ideas throughout the years. Do you think that this has been something building for a really long time now?
Probably in my subconscious. I really had forgotten about the song completely until you and I started putting the book together, you with the visuals. And then I think you were the one who reminded me about the song because I'd completely forgotten about it. But I love imagination, right? And I love, writers like Lewis Carroll and Roald Dahl and, like storytellers, musically, especially McCartney, Ray Davis, etc. So imagination, I think, is so key, especially these days.
Hans, you're a very creative person, but what happens when you hit those writer's blocks? What do you do to get into your imagination or get inspiration?
I don't hit those spots, strangely enough. No, I really don't. I don't worry that there's no idea. I think there's always an idea. It's just that one idea is not as good as the other. So you got to go through some kind of powers of elimination and decide. Because
I mean,
sometimes I do sit at home alone and scream to
do
myself.
you...
Yeah. You know,
There we go. There's the answer.
yeah. Screaming is good. It's primal scream therapy. Yeah.
So music is clearly a very important element in the story. It's throughout the story, it's pretty much about music. Can you elaborate on how music has been important throughout your life?
Oh, my dad was a musician, had his own radio program and stuff like that. But, let's not go back into my mother's womb, right? I've done that. I did that when I first took acid. I don't want to do that again. I was born with music. I was born meeting people like Dave Brubeck Quartet when I was like 5, 6 years old, which I can't remember because my dad was a jazz musician. So, I learned music listening to Ella Fitzgerald and Errol Garner and all those jazz guys, Sarah Vaughan. When I got into rock, it was much later on than most guys. And then, then I was more interested in the songwriters like Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Leonard Cohen, Ray Davis. I was more interested in them than bands.
In the story, Madison meets these four characters that kind of remind me of the Beatles. Now, I know that you've actually met the Beatles. Do you have anything you wouldn't mind sharing, something memorable that happened when you met the Beatles?
Well, I like the fact that first time I ever saw John Lennon was in Hong Kong and he was wearing a T-shirt that said John Lennon. And people were going up to him and saying, "Are you John Lennon?" And he was saying no. I think George was the most interesting and inward looking. He's a very deep man, but with an incredibly weird and dark, good sense of humor, which which is why, you know, Monty Python's Life of Brian was financed by him. So he had this incredible way of thinking very positively. It's almost like I would think, you know, looking back, I think he saw maybe this day coming of lockdowns, and you
Wow.
know, he was happy in his garden, you know, working away in his garden, and he didn't like fame and all of that. So I think
Mm.
his music, and especially his song "All Things Must Pass," is really, to me, inspiring. You know, he inspires me as a, not as a musician, as a human being. I don't think many musicians really inspire me. I mean, Dylan does because of his lyrics, right? But he's,
Mm.
you know, you speak to people about Dylan and they go, "How on earth could you like Dylan? He can't
Mm.
sing." Well, he's not a
Mm.
singer, you know. He's a
Mm.
storyteller. So
Is Madison modeled after anyone you know? And is there any sort of psychological relief when you get to write a character after someone?
it's modeled after about 3 women in my life. I didn't even realize what until she turned out to be Scandinavian. There are, I think, 3 to 4 different women in her. So I think Madison is honestly all of them. And if they each had one common denominator, is it's the fact that they were all creative in their own ways.
Mm.
All were creative women. No
Mm.
bimbos allowed.
Wanna be a member, wanna be a member.
Yes. The Madison, the person, she's someone you would get along with.
Yeah, I wish I could marry her, you know.
If the book could be made into a big Hollywood movie, who would you choose to play Madison?
Well, she's, I hate to say it, but I mean, she's not old, but I find her fascinating. Is Zoe, yeah,
Ah.
but
Mm.
it's too old, right? But
Mm.
younger, I really don't know. I don't see Nicki Minaj playing Big Medicine, you know, or Cardi B, right? But
Would be a bit weird.
Zoe, yeah.
Do you have any interesting little writing quirks?
Well, I have a friend called Tom Vandell
Mm.
who's known me for about 20 years, and he'll always tell me, "Oh God, mate, not another song about a train leaving the station and thunder and rain and lightning." I guess those are the things that come to mind when I'm writing. And now that Tom has kind of told everyone on Facebook, you know, whoever bothers to read what Tom says, like, "Oh, crikey, mate, not another song about leaving the station on a train." I'm kind of wary about, but because my songs are all about a journey, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to write about now taking a train to have that journey. So I'm kind of running out of methods of getting from point A to point B.
Mm.
If it's not a train, because I'll have Tom saying to me, "I knew it, it's a train." And then it comes in, it's stuck in that tunnel, comes into the light, and then it's raining, you know. And he's right, you know. It's when you feel you're writing and it's become formulaic, you kind of try too hard to be different. But when you try too hard to be different, I think you're not being honest to yourself. So if it's going to be a train, screw it, it's going to be a train. You know, lots of
So
things happen on a train.
So how do you find the balance between trying to be original but not trying to be different just for the sake of being different?
Oh, I think that's a huge mistake of a lot of people, especially musicians, trying to do what everyone else is not doing. I think that is, you're doomed to failure if you try so hard to be original that you end up really messing things up. Because if it doesn't come naturally, it's so forced, you know. It's like, instead of just a 4/4 beat, okay, I'm gonna change the beat in such a weird way, but you're gonna lose people, you know. I think trying to be original for the sake of being original is so wrong. But if you write something and someone says to you, wow, that's new, and you go, huh? And then you realize, well, okay, you know, so it's your audience advising you, or telling you, as as opposed to you trying to second guess your audience.
Would you say the story just poured out of you, or did you have to try?
I had actually written the story in about an hour and a half. I just didn't know how to end it. So I kept going back and just revising the tenses as opposed to redoing the whole story. Story was written, Kat. The thing is, it was always the end. How should this thing end? But, you know, it's how does something start on a blank sheet of paper, right? You've got the idea and you write it. And honestly speaking, I believe there are two people within you anyway. The other person in me was actually writing the whole story for me.
Okay.
The person that maybe I don't know as well as I should, or the person I'll never know, and maybe I will in my next life. But that person always helps me in my writing. So that story was all written.
I was going to actually ask, you know, in every story, it's a dog, that's the sidekick. Why did you choose a cat for this one? And also the interesting name choice of Lego. What inspired that?
I love cats. Cats are very fond of me. Yeah, I love cats. I had a cat for 22, 23 years old, for 23 years. And the cat would really look after me. And funnily enough, the cat chose for me the woman that I eventually married, you know.
Okay.
And the woman I also divorced, but, you know, but she chose that one because even though she was asthmatic and had couldn't be around cats, this cat jumped on her lap, whereas other girls would say, oh, get it off, you're talking about the cat, right? And then that made me go, well, I ain't gonna be with this woman for long if she doesn't like my cat. Whereas the person I married, she jumped on her lap, and even with her asthma and her having a problem breathing, you know, and going, right? She got used to my cat, right? But when she was taking deep breaths and was in my apartment, right, I really thought it was passion. But poor thing couldn't bloody breathe, you know, because of the cat, you know, furball, you know.
You chose to set this story in a New Territories village. Why there?
I have no idea.
Okay, great answer.
I think it changed quite late on in the story because it was like, where's this gonna be, you know? And then, you know, Hong Kong, you know, is going through the paranoia with masks and, you know, people scared to get into the elevator if the mask isn't over your nose. And we all went to a little restaurant. And it was a beautiful area of the New Territories I'd never been to. It had a very calming influence on me. So I think when I came back, I wanted to quickly change it from where, because I'd left it a blank of where she was. And then I thought I'll be specific and have her there, you know, because it then helped with the other characters
Yeah.
and getting the story up and running, so to speak.
Not to give anything away, but at the end of the story for the main character, there's certainly a moment of clarity. Is this something that you feel like you can relate to, that you've also experienced a moment like this?
No, I just think it's something that should be shared with people. I think I think there's not enough teamwork happening in the world. I think there's people working in isolation too much. I mean, we're already sort of living in isolation, right? And if you start working in isolation and there's no teamwork, I think it's like, you know, the sound of one hand clapping, you know, it's, you don't have the feedback that you need. So if you're talking about the clarity of what I was writing and what I was trying to say is that, you know, let's get back to being inspired. Let's get back to using one's imagination, right? Let's get back to teamwork, which even though, you know, lockdown or whatever, you could do, right? But I think teamwork's really interesting. And, you know, how, you know, I've read nearly everything there is to read about the Beatles, right? And I don't think half of what they're doing would have happened if not for teamwork, but which included their Merlin, who was their producer, George Martin. I think George Martin is Merlin, and I don't start me on my Arthurian theories, right, of Merlin and King Arthur and Guinevere and the number 12 and King Arthur being the same person as Jesus and all that. It'll be very long. But there is a lot of, I think, Arthurian legendary in a lot of the songs I write. The setting may be modern, right? But I think it's a lot to do with that era of romance. Romance is plays a huge part in my life. And I think there's a feeling of romance running throughout this story, even though it's not exactly, you know, a love story. It's more of a love story to things that are positive and good for you, you know?
The one reason I like your book so much is because it's modern but timeless. You know, you've got the social commentary of the current pandemic and lockdown and everything. However, on the other side, you've also got the romance and the search for clarity, stuff that we're always all going to go through at some point. Was that what you wanted? Something modern but timeless?
Honestly, didn't think that deeply, Kat. You know, when you totally threw me there, it was just, not that I'm shallow, but I just didn't think that deeply about it. It just came out of the inner me, you know, the inner me, God knows where he is, right? But if people get that feeling, that's fine, you know, but I don't think that deeply.
So then you posing a question right at the end. I won't say what the question is, but you posing the question at the end of the story. What do you hope that ignites in someone?
I hope it ignites an answer to me. You know, I hope I get an answer out of that.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're all searching for answers, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, you've edited it, you've read the story. You know, that question is actually pretty, if there's anything that's deep, it's is that question?
In the book, the character Ling is what I would call a fairy godmother, a guide, an angel, something like that. Have you ever had anyone in your life who's played that role for you?
Only my mother.
Oh, okay.
You know, I was born on her birthday. We're both Librans. I think we're both left-handed. I think, again, I didn't think that deeply, but I think the inner me was guiding me, and I think it was maybe my mother guiding me, you know. I think we could just learn a lot. I think we're always creating, Kat, you know. You're always creating, but I don't think sometimes you even know you're creating. That's the whole, it's magic, you know. It's all about magic, I think. I think we live in magical times, and there's magic happening all around us, and you know, there's another world going on right in this space. So if you believe in magic, it's like the name of a song. You could do so much. I think people don't believe in magic enough, and magic is inspiring, and it's to do with imagination, and it's positive, you know.
Well done, Hans. I think you've created a beautiful work of art, and it's positive, it's got a good meaning, a good message, and I really hope that it goes far.
Thank you for all the work you put into it, you know, because it's not easy. But, you know, I think it's a joint teamwork. It's a collaboration, you know, yeah. So I think we're on the right track, you know. I wouldn't get this far without you, right? And, you know, a couple of other people around me who say to me, you know, change this or switch this, you know. And they do it in a way that doesn't annoy me as well, which is good, because that's the worst thing.
Once it's already written.
And it's also so wonderful how you give creatives a chance and an opportunity and a platform to work creatively every day. Like myself, we're very lucky to be able to do something that we love every day in the creative field, because a lot of creatives don't get to do that.
Also, I'm not sure you know, but there are other aspects of the story to make it more interactive and get people to be more creative, so that they become part of the story.
Yes.
So it's like it's a never-ending story.
I was going to ask, do you have plans to continue the story, maybe?
Oh, for sure. I think, though, the continuation's not going to come from me. It's going to come from the readers and the listeners, you know, who might say, I think what should happen next is this, right? And then that jump starts you into something else, right? Give yourself up to imagination, free yourself from